All right. Well, thank you for joining us. If you are here for the data-driven impact storytelling, you are in the right place. Today, we are going to go over basically introductions of who we are, kind of set a grounding, like why we're here, why we're having this discussion, talk about impact and data, building trust with stakeholders, storytelling. And then we're going to have a really cool breakout session, which Goggin is going to lead. And for that, while we are recording this session, and everyone will get a recording of this session, everyone will get a copy of the slide deck at the end. But for the breakout session, we're going to jump to a new link where we're all going to be able to see each other and interact. And that will not be recorded to be able to keep those conversations a little more confidential, right? We'll shift at that point. But for now, we're going to be here and digging into and sharing all the good content. So first, who are we? I'm Jennifer Harity. I am by day the ESG and Sustainability Director at Sensiba, and by night the Governance Chair for B Local Bay Area. Goggin.
Wow, that was such a concise day and night. And I'm so I've been loving running into you and all the Sensible folks at various impact investing and social responsible business, community events and things for years now. And it's so nice to be here with you. Um, yeah, I'm the founder and creative director of Guru, which is a full service creative marketing agency. I'll talk a little bit more about it in a second. And also the founder of a platform, Maha Global, which is leveraging reputation intelligence to get companies to elevate their behavior in the corporate world. So we'll talk a little bit more about both of those things here shortly.
And so I know most of you may not know what Sensiba is. So a little bit more about what Sensiba is. We're a basic traditional accounting firm. I like to say traditional accounting firm, but with a twist because we are a certified B Corp accounting firm. And besides the traditional tax audit and consulting services, we host a holistic ESG and sustainability department, helping things with like dual materiality assessments, GHG footprinting, B Corp certification, EcoVadis, CDP, and impact reporting. So we've been in business for almost 50 years. Work in many, many different industries from tech and VC to manufacturing, food and beverage, really strong CPG knowledge, and really engaged in the B Corp community.
And so Guru, we are also a B Corp. We're actually a B1, which is a B Corp and 1% for the planet member. We're also got a Real Leaders Impact Award. I wish I could high five you virtually, Jennifer, for both those things. And last year, we got one of Inc. Magazine's Best Workplaces in 24. Guru really started as an experiment to see, if we created an incredible workplace where we had a playful culture and people got to work with things that had more purpose, more coherence between their personal purpose and overall mission, if they might do more innovative, creative work. And the experiment has been successful. We've built this amazing family of folks here. Here's just a kind of a swath of some of the clients we've worked with. We primarily focus in the climate action, mental health, healing food system sectors. We work across systemic change, and we try to find kind of the most conscious brands in certain verticals in each of those categories to help as well. We could flip to the next one. I'll tell you a little bit more about what we actually do because people are like, okay, so what actually does a creative marketing agency do? So in a concise way, what we do is in the upfront, a lot of research strategy insights on kind of what the positioning needs to be, what the theory of change, the impact should be of a brand or organization. We then develop brand identity, brand strategy, which is things like name, logo, full brand identity kit. And then what we're most known for is really developing the overall creative campaign that does storytelling to the world about your particular mission, company, product, service. And we also have the media side of that as well. So paid media, social media, PR, and the like. So we do all those things that you would expect from a full service agency. And if you flip to the next, what really makes us different is these specialized offerings. We've really been focusing for over 15 years on what we call the conscious consumer and conscious business. Um, and knowing that that conscious consumer is not a monolith, there's many different consumers, all kind of voting with their values in various ways. Many humans out there that are picking, a financial services firm to work with that may have values alignment with them, for instance, which is the reason they go to Sensiba, or an agency like us. So we actually put out a yearly conscious consumer insights report. We do a lot of these play shops, which are like workshops, but aligning stakeholders of a brand, like the employees, the leaders, the investors, sometimes even the retailers, into more of a flow state. So they're all singing from the same song sheet about a particular brand. And in connections, we've even built our own platform. So we call it Big Sister. The thought is using the powers of Big Brother for good. In today's environment, we've had to get really smart about first party data and how we leverage the learnings we've had from working with brands like Patagonia and traditional medicinals and others, and how we can then move those same folks into other brands and opportunities that we may have within our overall client set. So yeah, that's who Guru is.
So
And oh, go for it.
I was to say, let's get grounded in why we're here and everything that's going on right now, right? I think you're going to start with the culture perspective before I interrupted. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, just to kind of ground in where we're at overall, what is happening overall in culture of impact. So I'll move through a little bit of that, and then Jennifer will take us a little more deeper into some of the more need to knows around regulatory issues, things like that, so that you can be a little more in the know on these sorts of things. We can dive in. From a cultural perspective, kind of first off, like, many of the folks in this call may know this, but just to reiterate where we've been, I mean, the State of the Union on impact. Over the last 20 years, ESG and impact have really gone mainstream. I mean, we've even seen the Business Roundtable, with this push from shareholder primacy to stakeholder capitalism, right? We've seen the rise of the UNPRI, the Sustainable Development Goals over the last 20 years, and the expansion of B Corps throughout the world. It's been incredible, and even ESG assets, so environmental social governance assets under management reached 35 trillion globally in 2020. And then, we saw things like DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, become really central post 2020 George Floyd protests and other things happening worldwide. So we've all seen this massive trajectory in a very positive direction towards kind of social responsible business, impact investing, and ESG worldwide. Now, with any fast trajectory like something like this, you'll sometimes see some backlash, and that's what we're seeing really over the last few years. There's been growing pushback, unfortunately, against ESG, DEI, and what people are calling woke capitalism. So, we've seen in the news really this political polarization and culture wars, especially in the United States, hitting kind of, different ideologies, different sides of the aisle against each other in this pushback. We've seen state level policies, banning ESG investing in pensions, for example, in Texas and Florida. Um, after we saw a lot of assets going into things like ESG investing in pensions, over the last 20 years. And then massive disinformation campaigns tying ESG to anti business agendas, unfortunately. There's been quite a few articles. Actually, it's been very interesting over the last few years. I've been getting called a lot to do op-eds in some of these magazines and news stories talking about these larger disinformation campaigns and state and shareholder activism campaigns happening as well to try to push companies to not give in to the disinformation. Um, there's also been a lot of legal challenges and media attacks that have really chilled that corporate enthusiasm to move into ESG and DEI and things like that. You've seen companies like Target and others kind of pull back on some of their initiatives. And when I talk to communication leaders, like, CCOs of even Fortune 500 companies, things like that, I'm getting overwhelming, reports back that kind of aligned with this key industry report that came out in 24, citing that 42% of communication leaders are very much so relying on data, and half are citing the inability to measure impact effectively as one of their biggest challenges. So what that's saying is, there's kind of these overarching disinformation, misinformation campaigns that's making people do something that we're calling green hushing. Basically, even if they're doing the right things, they're afraid to speak about it, and especially afraid to speak about it if they don't have the right data. So that's all. That is what this webinar is about, and that's what we're going to dig into here. So what's actually happening? Well, ESG is evolving. It's not disappearing. There's this shift, though, from values-based to risk-based framing, especially in finance. So whereas it's been kind of a you should do this because it's the right thing to do, it's in alignment with your values, it's more of risk mitigation. And then, materiality really matters. Like I was just talking about in the data, ESG is now judged on the financial relevance of that. So, it's really folks are looking at the opportunity from a financial perspective, rather than doing it for strictly values alignment. And like I mentioned, green hushing, brands doing good but not talking about it. So, the other thing that's happening is these DEI programs are being restructured, not scrapped. So, there's more focus, for instance, on inclusive culture and results, and less on the optics of potentially putting out DEI news. And so, what are some of the global trends to watch especially for, US based companies? Well, just look to the EU. EU regulation has been increasing pressure. There's the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. There's the SFDR, which is the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. All of this, and the other thing that's happening is actually in the EU, you're seeing a lot of CEO bonuses being an incentivization schema, not just tied to financial performance, but also tied to ESG performance. And we think that the US is going to follow closely behind. So investor demand is still strong. Things like BlackRock, Vanguard backing ESG, but it's happening quietly, more quietly than it was 10 years ago. And things like supply chain transparency, climate risk disclosure are becoming, mandatory. I mean, Gen Z and millennials still expect brands to lead with purpose, and you're seeing that not just from a consumer side, but also from an employee side. They want to go work for the brands that are still signaling that they're moving in that direction.
Yeah, not just expect, but they're demanding with their
Exactly.
dollar and where they're spending their dollar. Yeah.
And lastly, and I'll pass back to you, Jennifer, is, so what do you need to know? What do the CEOs and the leadership need to know? ESG is not dead, thank God. It's being professionalized, so this is a good thing, right? It's being combined with risk mitigation. It's being combined with financial opportunity. We are starting to treat ESG and DEI as a strategic risk management, not just moral obligations. And we're really building trust through transparency and through measurable action. That's how companies are acting these days. So, for you all, we need to get ahead of regulations. We're going to get ahead of reputational risk. That's what this webinar is about. Jennifer's going to take us through how to get ahead of regulations. I'm going to talk a bit about how to get ahead of reputational risk with things like storytelling. And the main takeaway is don't just follow the headlines, follow the data, follow your stakeholders. And we're going to talk about this nexus point of data-driven storytelling.
Yeah, yeah. And we have real-time data coming back about the story, right? So, Goggin was talking about, Target and rolling back of DEI. And as we're seeing play out real time right now, Target and Costco. And, Target's rollback, they had real backlash and that story of that data. But Costco said, no, no, no. We actually measure our DEI data and we know it's important and we're going to stick to it. and the reputation came back. And you look at their earnings reports. Target is way down. Costco is up. Their membership's up. So they having the data and the numbers to make the business decisions off of definitely hits that bottom line for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the value chain impacts, right? So disclosure requests. A lot of CPG companies are getting disclosure requests from the retailers that they're selling into, right? Whether it's their carbon data or the diversity data. And disclosures are going to be kind of a standard going forward, right? So we've got globally, as Gagan mentioned, the CSRD and things like that happening in Europe. So if you have European entities or you're trying to sell into Europe, you're gonna have to be knowledgeable of those rules. But as we know, the SEC and the federal regulations are kind of not going to happen for a few years with the current administration. So we can safely assume that. But where it's really cooking is state level. So California has their two bills that they passed, and we're now working on implementation of those two bills. And that is California Senate Bill 253 and California Senate Bill 261. So 253 is basically any business in California that is $1 billion or more in revenue overall, right? Not just in California, but your overall revenue, 1 billion or more, needs to report scopes 1, 2, and 3. Scopes 1 and 2 will start reporting in 2026, giving us a 1 year, one more year to understand scope 3 because it's a beast. And so in 2027, you'll have to report scope 3. And what's going to happen is that while your company might not be $1 billion in revenue or more and mandatorily have to report, when those companies that do have to report hit their scope 3, scope 3 is all about supply chain or mostly about supply chain. And so they're going to be reaching down and asking their suppliers. So like once again, if you're a CPG company selling into Amazon or Whole Foods or Target or Walmart or any of those companies that do hit that 1 billion or more mark, you're going to have to send your numbers upstream because they're reaching downstream for their scope 3. So, you really need to make sure that you have this, because if you don't, you may not be a supplier anymore, right? This is going to be the name of the game. If you don't have this data, you're not going to be able to play with others. And while it's not that way now, it's heading that direction. And it's not just in California. There are other states that have similar laws that they're trying to get passed. New York, Oregon, Washington, Illinois, right? Colorado. So a lot of states are digging into this. And now the second one, Senate Bill 261, is basically every 2 years doing a report talking about your climate related financial risks, right? And this is for companies that is 500 million in revenue or more. And this is going to get kind of interesting. And this is requiring companies to look at and really think about what is happening with climate change, right? And all of the different natural disasters that are happening. How is that impacting your business, right? We've all felt it with business insurance. And insurance for your properties, right? Not just for your business, but for your home. We know there's entire swaths of California that cannot get homeowners insurance because they live in fire zones right now. So this is really impacting, and having businesses have they considered how they're going to proceed, right? We had a client out in Texas that in 2024 got hit by those back-to-back hurricanes. The first one ripped the roof off the building. Second one, they couldn't get the roof fixed in time, and it just flooded out their entire facility. So they had to replace their equipment and do all the mitigation from all the water, and having an emergency fund just to have just in case, and plans and actions so that they could immediately react and not have to go, wait, what do we do? What do we, where are we going to get the money for this? Where's, that was already set up and ready to go. So having those plans, those strategies, and talking about them in those reports and disclosing that brings down your risk for your business a lot. So a lot of this stuff, yes, it's numbers that you're going to have to do, you're going to have to play to be able to get into the different, industries and suppliers, whatever. But it's also really looking at your business risk and opportunity. So, being able to tell these stories to your customers really helps that chain, right? Because as we're talking about, it's not just expected, it's demanded for millennials and Gen Z and for all the upcoming generations. They really want their companies that they buy from to be able to hold to their values. And they're willing to pay a little bit more, as we've seen in lots of different surveys that have come out, a little bit more for those different products. And if your business isn't talking about this, you're losing money, right? So when we did a rebrand for our firm, and we had, we're really excited about it. We wanted to buy all sorts of swag for the employees with a new logo on it. And we made that full list of like, okay, here's everything that we'd really want. And then we sat and went, okay, now who is on this list that is a business that is a B Corp, that is minority owned, that is, has a sustainability and impact in the eco-friendly products, and anything that didn't fit into our values ecosystem immediately got tossed out. They never even got the second look. And so those companies lost our business because they didn't talk about what they were doing. So it's really something, from a reputational standpoint, which I know Gagan's going to dive into a little later, to really start to build up why you should care about this stuff, because your customers care, your investors care, the regulations are going to make you care because some of them have some real teeth to them. So examples of what some of these KPIs and measurements and metrics that we're going to be talking about, what are they, right? I have a couple examples. This is not exhaustive, but this is by industry, kind of some of the things that you would be looking at for, and some of the stuff you already have and are measuring. So it's just putting it in one concise report that you can talk about it and tell and do that storytelling around. So for consumer products, data security, being good stewards with your customer data, employee engagement and diversity, energy and water management, right? Food and beverage, you're going to have more product labeling and ingredient sourcing, right? Where are you getting your sugar from? If you're a candy manufacturer, right? That sort of thing. Professional services, like the accounting firms and the media agencies, we have to look at, are we advertising with integrity? Our workforce engagement, our data security and privacy, right? You want an accounting firm that really has really high data security and privacy because you're sending them all your data. So you want to make sure that that's there. Protection of IP and competitive behavior, right? So things that matter to those industries. And then obviously technology and communications, obviously data is going to manage. Data security is going to be a big one, but also energy management, right? Data centers are, really heavy on the grid. So how are they managing the energy that they're pulling from the grid? Many of them have switched to alternative uses and have solar or wind on site to help power their facilities. But also the types of mineral sourcing that's used in, putting together some of their products. I have a really great case study on why, and I know Gagan has one too, on why measuring these is so good. We did a carbon inventory for a winery, and through that carbon inventory found that the most heaviest part of their emissions was in their shipping of their cases of wine. Obviously, right? They're heavy cases. If anyone's ever listed a case of wine, it's some weight to it. So we made a little bit of a scandalous recommendation, scandalous for the wine industry, because we said, well, why don't you lightweight your bottles? Which in the wine industry, there's this myth that the heavier the bottle, the better the wine. And it is just a myth. I've had some really great lightweight bottles, but they were kind of taken back and we're like, okay, well, we'll just do two brands. We'll just do two brands. We'll try it on two brands. And we're like, okay, great. Just start there. That's fine. We know it's going to make an impact and that you'll want to spread it out. And so we knew it was going to make a really good impact to their bottom line. And so they went through and they did it and they implemented it. And what was kind of a cool thing that happened was that, one, the customers didn't notice, but who did notice was the folks that were stocking the displays at the wine and beverage stores. And so when they had to build these massive displays in the front of the stores, they knew those cases weighed less. And so they were more apt to pull their cases to build those displays, which means they got product placement prime product placement in the front of the stores, and they started selling more of those two SKUs. And so they had, you know, many different things that we've done with them. They've invested 19 million overall in their sustainability initiatives, but it's resulted in 26 million in bottom line savings. But that doesn't include the top line growth from that wine selling. And now they've lightweighted the bottles across all of their lines. They haven't told anybody still. That's why we can't use their name on this case study, because they don't want anyone to know their bottles weigh less. But they've done it, and they've seen real value from it on bottom and top line growth.
That's amazing. I just learned so much about how I should be thinking about it from my company. Thinking about some of those pieces. Like I know we think about where we're sourcing media from and kind of look at that as our supply chain because we do, you know, a lot of media. We actually built this platform I was talking about, Big Sister. But I don't think that we were including that in our impact reporting. So that would be that was interesting to see that from you. Um, I'll just lightly glance over this. I've been proud to work on Clover Sonoma for the last decade. We renamed them from Clover Stornetta to Clover Sonoma and then launched this platform. It matters where your milk comes from. And this was kind of there's a larger case study on our website at weareguru.com, and you can see the videos and all that sort of stuff. We'll share this presentation afterwards. But the cool thing about this was we really turned the impact report into a storytelling opportunity because it's rare that, you know, a lot of times people are not going to dig deep into an impact report, especially when you've done as many amazing things as Clover Sonoma has. And It Matters Where Your Milk Comes From really touched all these different areas. It touched kind of how the local community, where it's from Sonoma, it's from Happy Cows, it touched the American Humane certification and things like that, from family farms. So it talked about, you know, sustainability and generational you know, farms, and then from a conscious company, a B Corp, a 1% for the planet, and got to touch that. So it's kind of this expansive universe of impact and sustainability. And we were able to both, you know, build out that kind of larger impact report, but then create engaging tidbits that came out of that and became storytelling, social media ad connected TV ads and, you know, influencer opportunities and things like that. And so this campaign, More Than Milk, really was looking at how to support dairy farmers because they've been in decline over years in the United States and especially in California. And so we really, this video, if you watch it, kind of you know, was a tip of the spear kind of marketing tactic to bring people in with an emotional hit of, you know, why to buy Clover Sonoma, to support these cows, support these farmers. And people, you know, loved it. I mean, we saw a 30% increase in brand awareness, 26% increase in purchase intent, and a massive increase in organic searches based on this campaign versus some other more product focused campaigns. So it really showed kind of that opportunity to then take an impact report, a deep one like what Sensiba does in such an amazing way, and then for you know, an agency like us to then take that and break it into smaller pieces and tell that story outwards. We can go to the next. I want to give people some good time at the end of this for a breakout session. So I'll just, we can kind of maybe run through this section a little bit and then we'll get into the breakout.
Yeah. So really high level sustainability drivers from a risk management standpoint, this stuff, cost savings, physical risks, reputational risks, regulatory risks. From an opportunity, there's market opportunities, there's technology opportunities. So there's, you know, like I said, we'll share this deck so you guys can go in and dig in, particularly that video that we tried this morning, but it was a little too choppy and we decided not to show it. So that's why we're going to let you guys have it in the deck. Sustainability impact areas, obviously in different areas of your business, it's going to hit your operations, it's going to hit your social, it's going to hit your value chain, right? So this does hit in every aspect of your company. So if you do these initiatives and you just add it as a tack on, it's not really going to work. You need to really flow this type of work of doing DEI, of doing ESG initiatives throughout your organization, because it does hit each of these areas, from operations and reducing your cost for energy consumption and your water usage and your waste and your fleet vehicles, to your social, supplier diversity and philanthropic activity and your value chain, as we talked about with all the carbon stuff. It really does impact your entire organization. So tack on initiatives really don't work as well as stuff that's woven in. And that's what we help our clients do, is weave that stuff in. And do things like this materiality assessment to figure out what actually is material for you to measure as an organization. And so I really love this chart because it really shows, there are some things that are, yes, should be there, but maybe they're not as important, right? So like for this transportation company, one of the things that is on the social spectrum is the noise, right? The noise of their trucks running, their neighbors, their stakeholders, their community, right? The noise of their trucks, not really as desirable. They want to keep that noise down. The company that's actually running the trucks could care less about the noise of their trucks, right? So that's why it's more towards the stakeholder side of that graph. But it's an important thing if they want to operate in that community. You can actually, try to keep your truck noise down. Well, it's not really important to you. It's important to your stakeholders, which are gonna, come back and hurt your reputation if you don't keep. So I like to use that one as a nice example because I think everyone can kind of get that. But for a transportation company, obviously the top thing was their GHG emissions. So that is one of their top things. So I like to show this just to kind of give it an idea of like, yes, there's all sorts of things that you should be measuring, but let's talk about the top 5 to 10%, KPIs, and really focus on those, because then everything else will kind of fall into place. So building trust with stakeholders, as we've talked about, and, lending institutions, right? Mitigating all these risks help you really negate, things that are going to red flag for your lenders. I know us being a B Corp and all the work we've done, when we went and re-upped our professional insurance, we actually got some lower rates because we've done all of this and really addressed this. So, that really helps for insurance, for banks, right? Suppliers, customers, employees, regulators, right? I'll let Gagan dig into that a little more with Maha.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, I'll this and everyone here will get this deck afterwards too. There's so much good information here, especially I've just like really love to learn from Jennifer and the Sensiba team. They go so deep and have been just are an incredible, not just finance, but outsourced kind of fractional, sustainability practice and things like that for companies. So yeah, every time I get to listen to you, I learn something. Um, Maha Global is a platform that I co-founded 5 years ago, and the idea was basically there's a lot of brands that are making and CEOs that are making pledges out there around things like SDGs and ESG practices, things like that. But a small percentage are actually executing on them. And so the idea was, what is the leverage point? How do we get companies to actually execute on these commitments and leverage so what we found was leveraging their reputation, connecting reputation to behavior would get them to elevate that behavior. So we created this platform where we basically integrate what a company is doing and what they say they're going to do. And we look at the gap. So if we actually click to the next slide, we call it basically this perception and reality. So for a long time, people have been measuring kind of sentiment analysis or perception of a company through the eyes of like a materiality study, looking at how your investors feel about the company, your consumers, your employees, and giving that leadership a general idea. But what that doesn't consider is what you're actually doing and how that impacts reputation. So we don't believe reputation is just about what you say out there or the perception, but it's actually about what you actually do, the reality of it. And so we're bringing together millions of different data points to look at this. And if we go to the next slide, a really easy way to understand this is kind of what is the, I think we might have skipped one slide. Oh, maybe not. Okay, that's okay. We can go to that one. Just one more. We look at the perception reality gap. of so for instance, working with companies like Levi's and Starbucks, we can look at with Starbucks, for instance, what is the perception of them environmentally, and what is the reality of their behavior? If the perception is fantastic, but the reality of their behavior is not great, then we know that they need to move resources into a lot of those areas that Jennifer was talking about earlier. If the perception is that they're not great environmentally, but the reality is they're fantastic, that's a storytelling opportunity. So that's kind of what we're looking at with this perception reality gap. So in a couple ways that shakes out, with Starbucks, there were these reactive insights when they went through our platform, looking at kind of the problem was unionizing employees eroded brand trust. The solution was that we really could reveal the link between that employee satisfaction and the community impact, offering a clear strategy for managing the issue they were dealing with. The takeaway was that the employees sought stronger alignment with the overall company's values. However, they didn't catch that. This was a reactive insight that we saw afterwards based on the data. The brand value dropped 12% compared to the S&P's 2% decline. Now, when you look at the work we did with Levi's, these were predictive insights looking at what they needed to do to enhance brand relevance. This was pretty fascinating. We uncovered that there was some consumer sentiment that pointed at when to speak out on positive environmental performance. I always think about brands like Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's and how fantastic they are at knowing when to speak out about environmental performance or when not, or when to speak out about social issues. The takeaway was that, this really can drive integration with their new product, their sustainability messaging. What should they talk about? What should they not talk about? And the metrics we saw was that it actually improved their net zero, their trajectory towards that by 16%. They saw a 41% stock price increase based on talking about certain things versus not talking about other things. So net, if we go to the next slide, what we're really getting into, what we're talking about is how do you frame this narrative? I mean, it's all based on the data. So you have a group like Sensiba that can help you get your arms around that data and present it in a really intelligible way to your various stakeholder audiences that you need to speak to. But then it's okay. Now we've got the data. What's the storytelling opportunity? How do we reframe that narrative? Shift from this woke language to business relevant reframing. So a few ideas of that, talking about it as a human capital strategy more than a DEI program, for instance. We talked about this backlash earlier, talking about climate risk mitigation rather than a net zero pledge. It's easy to make a net zero pledge. There's so many CEOs out there that are making these net zero pledges, but then don't really have a plan to make it happen. And so thinking about climate risk mitigation, being really transparent on that journey towards net zero with where you're at and where you want to go. And then thinking about governance modernization rather than ethics training, right? So these are just small shifts in language that actually have major impacts that we've seen. It's more of a focus on resilience, innovation, long-term value.
All right. So we're at the breakouts part of the session. And that means we're going to need to shift over to an instance where we can all see each other to be able to work on this. So Louis, who is working the back end, has dropped in a link if y'all can meet us there. And
in 5 minutes.
5
So you want
minutes.
me, maybe I'll give the prompt to start it out. We'll be here together for just 5 minutes, and then at 9:45 Pacific, we'll drop into our breakout. So the I know it says a 10-minute breakout for individual work, but because we're so excited, we went a few minutes over in our chat here. And so we're going to give you a 5-minute breakout for the individual work. So here's your homework for 5 minutes. And it's kind of nice to have, I think creativity thrives in constraints sometimes. So what we want, Jennifer and I want you to do is think about what's the top aspirational headline you want for your company 5 years from now. So you can write front page New York Times, here's the headline that you would love to see come out about your company 5 years from now. So we want you to write that headline, and we want you to then think about if you were reverse engineering that desired headline, what is the impact data or the ESG metrics that might be needed for you to validate that successful headline? So take 5 minutes. We'll sit here together for 5 minutes while you think through that. And then at 9:45 a.m., so in just 5 minutes, jump over to the link that's in the chat. And that you're going to be in a breakout room with 5 other folks in your group that you can actually talk about your headline, your different data that you might need to achieve that, and get a little bit of feedback from the group. And then we'll be together. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to seeing the discussions that we have in the breakout room. So Goggin, if you stay here, I'm going to go to the breakout room and get that set up. All right. So see y'all in 5 minutes.